Rent.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Give Me Rent. This is Noah, and I'm joined by Dylan.
Yo.
And today we are going to be talking about Andor.
About
Now,
time.
before we really delve into it, Dylan, do you want to kind of give the viewers or the listeners a little summary of what Andor is exactly?
Well, I think most people know that Andor is a Disney Plus series under the Star Wars banner. It's only lasted for 2 seasons, so it honestly didn't run for too long, and it's
Intentionally, though.
yeah.
I think originally they did have some. They wanted it to go for possibly longer, but once they knew kind of how to budget the series and where they knew where it was going always.
budget the series while this.
But
Talking
yeah,
about
they
budget.
really we'll get into that in a little bit, but this was an expensive show.
Yeah.
And I will say we were very lucky to even get 2 seasons of it. Especially in the current landscape of streaming. They're not even making money on these things.
Honestly, this show is actually sort of an anomaly. In my opinion, I also feel like it is definitely one of the higher caliber Disney Plus series.
I think undoubtedly it's the best Disney Plus series.
Yeah, and honestly, in my mind, I would have to agree with you there. I actually think that none of the Star Wars series even come close to it in
what
terms
other
of quality.
series, like Clone Wars, they finished it and that was very special for people. But
yeah, I'm not counting Clone
in the
Wars,
realm
though.
of live action, Disney Plus. There's been a lot of schlop, but there's been some decent stuff. I still think this is miles ahead.
Yeah,
Like-
and in terms of writing and just kind of direction, everything is insanely high caliber, from the acting to the set design to literally them just actually doing some old-fashioned filmmaking and actually using actual locations, which something that I
went a
think
long way.
the other shows was
Locations
really
were actually
missing.
exciting
Yeah.
again in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like very intriguing.
Well, let's
not
talk
that they
about
weren't-
locations. I feel like
Not that they were boring in the other projects like Mando.
the show's
and
use of planets is definitely far different than anything we've seen in the Star Wars universe. If you know what I mean, I think it just really delves into like culture.
you get
and
some returning
species
planets for
and
sure, but
Yes, but it really
it
delves
delves
into
into planets
Yeah.
in a certain way, like Gorman and
Coruscant.
Coruscant, especially because it's heavily featured in the series. But it was kind of showcased in a way that
Different.
we have never really
We've never
seen.
seen it.
Obviously, that's something that people talk to about this show as well. It's really grounded in a sort of reality that we've never really seen in Star Wars.
It's almost so grounded that I really feel like, I mean, it is just a great show. Like it's
I
let alone
I
being a
have
great Star
recommended
Wars
this
show.
to people that have not
Yeah,
watched
exactly.
Star Wars.
It's
Or
just a
that
good
don't love
show.
Star Wars.
It just really has it has such a strong sense of itself, I feel like.
Yeah.
And it also really understands the message it's trying to convey. And it could be in any other, it could be in other it could be any other genres.
The show actually tackles a bunch of genres.
Yeah, that's very true actually.
Because of how they chose to do the series as well within kind of arcs.
Yeah, I was about to say
Which was very intriguing as
the
well.
arc format.
Before we delve into the story structure, I just want to say for the listeners out there that really don't know what this show is exactly, if you're thinking it's just a ramp up into the spin-off film Rogue One, because of course Cassian Andor is a big character in that movie. I mean, you obviously see his ultimate fate in that film. And watching this show, you might delve in and be like, we know where it's going, it's this and that, but this show was never really supposed to be an exact ramp up to Rogue One.
Yeah.
It really is just this exploration of really what it takes to build a rebellion.
Yeah. Exactly.
That alone, that angle that they knew exactly what they wanted it to be.
And I do think that Cassian was the perfect character to kind of like bridge all the other new characters in the series. Like he's such a good kind of just like person to give all these other people outlets into the world. Like you actually get to learn about Imperial people. You get to learn about people that started the rebellion and
well, this
really,
is a
really
show, although
their
it's
lives.
mainly about building a rebellion. This is a show about people.
Yeah.
Just normal everyday people.
Well, these are
within
some of
this
the best
galaxy.
characters I think we've seen in years from Star Wars.
These are some of the best written characters I've seen in a show like recently.
Like I genuinely believe they got to some of the most complex places in writing I've seen in just any
No, but
series.
this just shows you really like when someone takes an IP like from Disney, especially they own so much. I mean, they have so thousands of IPs they could use. Star Wars is the mecca, 100%. They knew that they messed up with it a little bit. So to be honest, this is kind of a result. This show, this series, what has happened, it's really a result over kind of the frantic panicking of Lucasfilm, the chaoticness of what's been happening at that studio. I gotta admit, this show would not exist without Kathleen Kennedy, which is obviously she gets a lot of hate within, from Star Wars fans specifically about what she's
I don't want to
done.
say I'm not going to sit here and say that Andor saved Star Wars by any
but
in
it
any
shows
regard,
you
but yes.
what you can do with IPs,
100%.
like when you really care. And it's not about caring about tying into things. It's about caring about the project at hand.
Well, I truly think they just really struck gold with having a showrunner like Tony Gilroy, because he might have not been the biggest Star Wars fan, but he at least respected.
He still knew
what
that
Star
Star
Wars
Wars was a
was.
special thing,
Yeah.
which I looked like Disney kind of lost sight of that. He knew that he had an opportunity here when he was offered this job to tell a story that is, one, relevant, but two, also enriches a very amazing franchise that I've kind of forgotten about because of these lackluster sequels and all this Disney schlop that has come out. And I'm sorry for using the word schlop because they might be very special to some people. That's fair. Obviously people who worked on these shows that I don't even love, they probably love Star Wars, and that, to each his own. But for me personally, Andor might be the best Star Wars product since Revenge of the Sith. That's honestly not even that crazy to say, because I think this might be the best written project since Empire Strikes Back.
Well, I will say I do find Rogue One to be a pretty great movie, but that's also because you
I
have
love
the team,
Rogue
Tony
One, and
Gilroy,
it's
Gareth
made even
Edwards.
better now by this film.
Yeah.
But I think Andor is, I'm not going to say leagues ahead of it because it's
But
still,
I do think the tone and the writing in Andor is significantly better. I agree with that.
Because
For
listen, they're still trying to have fun and make it this space adventure, Star Wars, kind of have a classic feel, harkening back to the 70s show. And not that Andor doesn't, but Andor really does stand on its own as well. Like, it enriches
I
Star
want to
Wars.
rewind the clocks a few years back before even season 1 of this show came out.
Yeah.
When I heard they announced a few shows, they announced Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, I was excited. I was definitely most excited for Obi-Wan. Like, that was the one I was really
Obi-Wan was the project that most Star Wars fans kind of wanted, like spin-off wise.
True.
And in hindsight, I will say, and I've said it on the channel before, I'd still probably rather all these spin-offs not exist. Even Andor. I love this series so much, but I'd still probably prefer it to not existing just to keep the saga just 1 through 6, and that's it. But then again, Star Wars, even George knew, it was never going to end.
Yeah.
It needed to evolve in a certain way. But this show is a great evolution, but it also enriches George's original trilogy, at least.
And also what he was going for in that original trilogy.
Exactly.
Like,
a lot of people...
It's true to the story that George was trying to tell.
Especially in those originals, because, of course, with the prequels, a lot more Jedi, a lot more magic.
Yeah, but he was trying to tell different stories. Then.
Yeah, and that's a different story.
This enriches his original trilogy.
This was
so well. And we actually watched The New Hope last night in preparation for this. And... honestly, watching Andor before that, and then Andor, Rogue One, A New Hope, it's like a whole new trilogy. It's it's awesome.
Well,
it's
something we've talked about that Disney Star Wars sadly did, I mean, at least in our minds, it might not be for everyone, but they kind of diluted what A New Hope really is.
Mm-hmm.
Luke is the New Hope, and he brings this hope back to the galaxy by, blowing up the Death Star,
Yeah.
I hadn't watched it in a minute, and it was great to just delve into A New Hope again, or really just Star Wars again. We watched the theatrical cut, actually, which I've maybe never seen fully.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting as well.
interesting
Kind of
watch.
just trying to lock in on certain things that I haven't before. I mean, not that I haven't before, but it's been so long since I've watched it. So watching it in this new context with Andor was very interesting. We watched Andor, and then Rogue One, and then Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So that also gave Luke's, what he does in the end of that film, it gave it so much more weight.
Yeah.
But also, I feel like that was there before, but we lost it with the dilution of, knowing so much more people were alive in that era.
Andor honestly adds to, how big of a deal the first Death Star was, It really was, the rebellion is like basically about to crumble at the end of A New Hope. You know what I mean? Like because of what these rebels really did. Like they weren't even like, you know, I mean, they're rebels at the end of the day. Like they just were getting kind of screwed through the whole trilogy. But seeing them be able to, you know, form a rebellion with like, you know, you literally see from the ground up in Andor. That's what I love so much. You see what it really takes to like build a rebellion on this scale. It's just so interesting to see, especially the different kinds of ways people had to make sacrifices. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting too. Obviously, you know, jumping from Andor to Rogue One to Star Wars, you slowly get more light with it, lighthearted. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Star Wars is made for kids.
Well, let's talk about it real quick. Andor is
not,
without a doubt, the darkest product.
No, but
we've got it.
It's genuinely the only product within this franchise that isn't made for kids.
Oh yeah, it is made for adults.
No, but like that's what they set out to do. They set out to take this so seriously and make an adult show set within this universe.
Well, that is probably the biggest gripe that some people have with it.
Exactly, and that's what I wanted to delve into, because there are certain Star Wars fans that believe this series kind of diverges too far from what made this saga special to them. And, you know, it's valid, the complaints some people have, because, I mean, each product, I mean, Star Wars specifically now, it's going to mean something different to each person. Obviously, people hold this saga very special to their hearts, but they might view it very differently than me and you. Mm-hmm. Obviously, for us, the original trilogy is the best of it, but we love the prequels. We think they've aged pretty amazingly. But it was amazing to kind of go back and be like, yeah, like the original Star Wars was that first one.
Yeah.
And that was great to see something that took place in between 3 and 4 that really respected what that movie was going for. Mm-hmm. Not diluting what that movie was going for. There's like, you know, there's certain projects that kind of just, it didn't kind of say that Luke wasn't as important as he was, but it made it feel a little weird knowing there's a lot more people that have the abilities that Luke does and they're alive. That was just interesting. But now we had a series that never even showed Jedi. It showed us that, yeah, a lot of people in this galaxy have no idea what a Jedi is. Mm-hmm. They even though they were very relevant like 20 years before this series begins, maybe even like 15 years before it begins, the Emperor was able to snuff that out. It's a very vast galaxy, and this show really hones in on that. These people were living their lives, and it was upended by a regime.
And I truly think this is definitely the thing that makes the Empire the scariest in all of Star Wars media.
They have never been this scary in anything.
Yeah, it's genuinely
Stormtroopers were scary in this show.
Yeah, they're depicted in a light that you genuinely see what the Empire does to these worlds. Rogue One showed us a little bit of a glimpse of it, and I actually think this was the best part.
Rogue One was a good glimpse into how the rebellion had to do certain things. Obviously, slimy things, a little, you know, Cassian's introduction.
And that was genuinely my favorite part of Rogue One, and I feel like Andor just kind of, you know, amplifies that so much more. Like, it really...
Well, we now also know what Cassian has sacrificed.
Yeah.
We now know why. I mean, his speech to Jyn in that movie has so much more weight. Even if the fighting since he was 6 years old doesn't fully make sense because of Andor.
Yeah.
You know, you can make it make sense still.
It's honestly, it's wild to me, though, because watching season 2, I was like... I don't think there's any way they can recontextualize some of Rogue One for me. Like, obviously, it's like very set in stone. But no, the last moment of Andor kind of recontextualizes the movie a little bit for me. And I was like, it's kind of genius. I like Tony Gilroy really struck something in me with the writing of the final episode, because wow, the final shot is powerful.
Well, something that's very interesting about the final episode and the final arc. And for listeners out there, we're going to delve into some slight spoilers here. Nothing too crazy, but just to kind of talk about one overarching thing in Season 2. This was a show that obviously it didn't want to include... It intentionally didn't include Force users and even mentions of the Force.
Yeah.
Until a certain pivotal moment in Season 2 that it showed a Force healer. It wasn't a Jedi. It wasn't, you know, someone who even knew of the Jedi Order, maybe.
It was sort of someone...
probably did.
Someone kind of similar to Chirrut Emi or whatever.
Kind of similar to the people you see on Jeddah, but this person was already on Yavin. Uh-huh. But it also kind of helped contextualize why in episode 4 they say "May the Force be with you" so much.
Yeah, like people definitely
Like,
believe in the
know,
Force.
do know what it is,
Yeah.
but a lot of people in the galaxy just didn't have time to even fully believe in it. Like
Yeah.
Han and Cassian, like
Well, that's what the Empire did. Like
exactly.
Well, the Emperor himself really wanted to get rid of just belief in the Force because he truly just wants the power. For
He doesn't
himself.
want. He doesn't even want people to know he could.
Well, exactly,
do it.
because he just wants to be the only
And
Force
I
user.
will also say,
Vader's there.
very
but-
genius never showing him in this show.
Oh yeah.
Kenobi couldn't help it. And that's
His presence
fair. I mean,
is felt.
Darth Vader's
His
in it.
presence is
But his
felt
presence had
so-
never been felt like this since
Yeah.
episode 5. He's in it
Episode
in the
4 and 5.
hologram, but it felt like that again.
Yeah.
And
Where
yeah.
he's there. He's always looming over. But
So in
you don't need to show him.
in your mind though, this is true Star Wars. This isn't. It obviously feels very down to earth. It also some of the things kind of hit close because they
I always
feel relevant.
thought when Star Wars got shipped off to Disney, the whole thing that I wanted out of the new movies was at least make them conducive to creativity.
Yeah.
And have someone new do something new with the franchise. I think Rogue One was a great step in that direction where someone at least had a new lens and showed something new. Andor is that 10 times more where it just really has a different take on this lore and what you can do with it.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I see what you're saying. It isn't going to always work when they do different takes. I think a major issue of the Disney era has really been how they got so lost in how they were like, we need to call back to certain things. Especially, like, weirdly, they had a weirder fascination with the original trilogy and what they meant to people than Andor did. Andor seems to really have understood it.
Yeah.
But the sequel trilogy, with trying to copy and emulate, what the originals were, just didn't work at all.
Andor does it in tone and in what it's going for in its story.
It sucks
It's not
because
gonna,
the sequels,
it doesn't
like,
do stupid callbacks.
it sucks
and-
because the movies they kind of go against the sacrifice that was made in Andor now. Like we see it in Andor and we see it in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
That's the worst part of the sequels. One of the worst parts in my mind is how it really just deletes the sacrifice from the original, like from Star
the original
Wars.
rebellion. Yeah.
Like all of that. Like that's the most the smack in the middle trilogy. Like Star Wars, the original trilogy. Like it's the most pivotal time in the galaxy. The Civil War.
Yeah. It's just wild to me that Disney didn't look and be like, all right, the prequels is this pre-Civil War, the original trilogy is Civil War, and then you have to see what happens after and the aftermath of that. You don't really see an aftermath. It's just continuation. It's just Resistance, First Order, and it's
We
just
don't
copy
even
and paste.
see. I mean, we've seen Mon post episode 6 now because of Ahsoka, but Mon Mothma, like, we don't even see her in the sequels.
Yeah.
Where is she? Like, this show genuinely reminded me and you how amazing this character is.
Yeah.
But also, like, I will say, she hasn't been featured in all too much,
Well, I
before.
think the
But she
show
was a very
kind of made her
important character.
an amazing character.
And this show
more
knew
so,
that.
at least.
This show was like, yeah, she's the leader of the rebellion. Like, what was she doing? It's interesting, that she wasn't in episode 3. They removed her from that. But even though they knew then, like, yeah, like Mon is a very important figure in the rebellion. It's very interesting that.
Well, I really just love the choice of POV in Andor. Like who we actually follow is just so, I think, brilliant.
Well, I was gonna say, Mon being one of the really bigger returning characters.
Yes.
Besides Saw Gerrera, I think they just really, really added so much depth to her.
Well, I just
Even
want to
Saw,
say
but her, especially.
every single character, or at least big character that we follow in Andor is very interesting. From Cyril to Luthen to
We gotta talk
Dedra.
We gotta talk about
to-
Luthen real quick.
Do you think Luthen is probably like the best new Star Wars character we've gotten in some time? Because I think I've heard that
might be one of my
conversation.
favorite characters in like anything.
Yeah, I mean,
Like obviously it's a little recency bias, but like we've been sitting on this. Like we finished the show like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Like really,
we've been
just,
sitting on it. Yeah,
I
Exactly.
the show was so great. I want to rewatch it. Like that's what I want to do right now. I want to.
I love that Luthen
is
is so great by the end of season 1, and then season 2 is basically like partly his season, and it really shows you what he has done throughout his life.
Well, the Luthen centric episode that happens in season 2.
there's a phenomenal.
There's an episode in there that delves into him and Clea's backstory. Clea is his sort of assistant, but the episode really delves into who she really is. To him and what their relationship was. Tony Gilroy definitely wanted to contextualize it before he ended this series.
Yeah.
And I thought he did it flawlessly, to be honest. That episode was gut wrenching, like genuinely just some of the most powerful stuff I've seen on TV. And that's just very interesting. I'm watching it. I'm like, yeah, this is in the same universe as, like Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
It's very interesting thing. But I love the prequels and stuff like that. But this was just some of the best, again, Tony Gilroy wanted to take it so seriously. And that's what they did. And it really shows. There's moments in this series that do good callbacks, stuff like that. But it never makes it the most important thing that they need to focus on.
100%.
Because when we look back on it, look, Mando Season 2 was amazing when it came out. We loved it. But it hasn't aged as well because it did start this trend of them being like, we have to bring in characters that people know.
Yeah.
It all has to be connected.
I think the one character showing up that I didn't mind was Luke, even though, that's the biggest one. But, they made it make sense for the story. So
and then
they
went back immediately back on it.
Yeah, and then they
brought
showed him
Luke
again.
back again. And diluted that special moment.
Could have been the one moment, and then that should have been the last we
Let's
seen of Grogu,
be
too,
honest.
not to get into
let's
that.
be real. They're probably going to have him in the movies. They're probably going to do CGI original cast members in the Mando movies. Let's be real.
They'll probably do something because they just can't help themselves. It's like they can't help themselves. They don't want to actually take the time to make new characters.
It's funny. Then you have a showrunner or a creator like Tony Gilroy, and he had moments where I think I saw he was considering putting Jyn in and considering putting Palpatine in, and he was just like, no, in the end of the day, that's just too fan servicey. Why would I want to focus on diluting or changing my story?
He had to put Krennic in, but again, it made a lot of sense for the story.
Krennic made sense. Krennic actually is not really,
and he doesn't overuse him at all.
Yeah, he doesn't. He's not even in it too much. Amount. But Krennic, it was very interesting to see him on top, which was very different. It's also amazing going from season 2 to Rogue One because of that.
Let's talk about the Imperial characters and just the Imperial system in this show. I think it's shown better than we've ever seen it before.
Yeah.
You truly understand.
Bunch of people just vying for power. You just
understand what the hierarchy is. And the hierarchy is essentially, it's kind of like the Wild West. These Imperial officers are just vying for power.
Yeah.
And whatever they can do to get it, they're going to do. And seriously, and you also have Dedra, who I think is one of the most interesting new characters we've gotten, and Syril, actually, as well.
Syril
These are the two main Imperial characters in the show are ridiculously complex, and two of my favorite characters in Star Wars we've ever gotten. But quickly about Dedra.
Partagaz also.
Quickly about Dedra, though. You
that.
have such an interesting part of the Empire that it's also just all implied stuff that we figured did happen. But she is a character who is brought up from infancy to work in the Empire.
Yeah.
And she's just brainwashed into believing that what they're doing is right.
And then you have Syril, on the other hand, where, he's brainwashed, but he's someone who's very much addicted to order.
Yeah, he believes in order.
He believes in it.
And the Empire says they strive for order, but eventually,
he wakes up.
He sees the cracks in between what the Empire is truly doing to the galaxy.
Listen, Syril might have been a bad guy character. I guess you can put him in that, but he's still a very tragic character.
Oh, yeah.
I definitely really cared for him. I thought he was one of the best characters of the show. In a show filled with amazing characters, nonetheless.
Yeah. And I think the Gorman arc is really where he gets to shine. The entire series, to be honest. He's great in the whole show, but the Gorman arc really put an emphasis on his character and showed you just
the way in which they really built tension how in this season, thinks. Especially with Gorman, was just so. It really just however they did it, the way in which they produced this show, it really helped put you there.
Yeah,
you felt like you were there witnessing this atrocity. It was insane. I hadn't felt that tension, that sense of tension, in this franchise maybe ever. Let's be real.
How do you think about, or what do you feel about the inclusion of K2? How they went about that?
Well, we knew K2, before the season came out, we knew Tudyk would be a part of it. And I think they didn't get carried away with that at all.
Oh, yeah.
Very interesting that, he was found on Gorman. I didn't expect that. That was a great
Well, the fact that he's part of the events that happen on Gorman is even crazier.
It is crazy.
And I think they use him.
Knows that.
They use him very well. I feel like how he was implemented in the season. He's really only in the one arc at the end of the series, which I think was smart.
Which is the ramp up into Rogue One.
Exactly. He actually really helps to bridge the gap between the series and the show.
Yeah. He also does. I mean, I won't spoil this because it's a way bigger spoiler than we've talked about. But once he's introduced into the show, it's at a moment where Cassian's looking for someone, just to say,
Cassian,
And it was a very interesting start to
Cassian
their
needed
relationship.
some light into his life. And
Yeah,
KT
it was
definitely filled a void.
their first meeting was definitely very well done.
Yes, I agree.
And then the jump into the next arc, which is something I want to talk about too, which is really the structure of this season.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a show that did arcs, like 3-episode arcs. There may have been a 4-episode one in season 1. I'd have to double check that. But in season 2, it was 3-episode arcs. And after each 3 episodes, it did a year time jump.
Mm-hmm.
So this last season was 5 years leading into Rogue One.
So the 5 years before the Battle of Yavin.
The 5 years before the Battle of Yavin, or the Battle of Scarif, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But I think that added weight to it by it saying at the beginning of each arc, 4 before Battle of Yavin, 2, 3, 2, 1, and then
also again just putting how much this show puts more emphasis on how important
that
event
moment is. Exactly. That's what I'm getting at. Just Luke himself
Luke,
is so important.
That original Star Wars is kind of the epicenter of the entire franchise. It really, because again, it is the original, and it's what spurred everything.
Yeah.
That's what Tony Gilroy respected with this show.
It really
Respected
just like
what
obviously
that did for just franchises in general.
Yeah, it's like when Lucas gave it the name A New Hope, like very much knew what that represented, and I'm very happy that Tony Gilroy and co. definitely respected that.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, yeah, we know, like that's one of the most important things that ever happened in this universe, at least. I don't give a crap about the Star Killer, whatever the hell that was. Again. But yeah, this structure this season, it really added that weight to get, and then when we finally get to Rogue One, you get to that final moment in this series, and it's just absolutely
kind of devastating.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say. It's just, I was sitting there floored, and also a great thing that they did in this show, it had very different music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, John Williams' Star Wars music is so iconic.
Yeah.
And then we get something like Andor where it's very kind of synth heavy.
Yeah.
Electronic stuff. And I think they did a great job of kind of transitioning. I think something they did in season 2 that was purposeful was a sort of transition into more
orchestral
music, more Star Wars like music.
To make it to bridge.
And I'm not saying it ended with John
Rogue
Williams.
One.
I mean, the credits I think did have some from Star Wars in there.
Yeah,
Throne Room or whatever piece
which is
it was,
great.
Which was I was watching the credits. I had a big grin on my face. It was just amazing. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, like we're heading into Rogue One and New Hope.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very just interesting how they purposely did that. I believe. Where it was like we're gonna just bring you out of the kind of the griminess of this and into the bolder, grander adventure.
Yeah.
And this season, kind of included an interesting thing where. I mentioned before they stayed away from Force users for a long time, and then they put someone in it who used the Force, a Force healer, like I said before. But
to an extent,
yeah, to an extent. But once she interacts with our lead characters, there's sort of a sense of destiny that's talked about, or kind of just alluded to.
Yeah,
it was a show that was very grounded, but then it definitely also pulled from the roots of this franchise and said, yeah, Cassian's a part of this whole storyline. Destiny of the Force, kind of in a way.
It's
the Force.
I think
was
that inclusion was Tony Gilroy finally admitting that yes, this is.
He's like, it's still in Star Wars. I need to make
the kind of the biggest part of Star Wars to many people is the Force, and
he made it make sense in the context of this series.
Yes,
because he wasn't going to ever show someone using the Force like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even fully known if she did use it, but it's pretty much implied she saw or felt something.
It's also, I think, the best use of kind of destiny in the Star Wars franchise that we've gotten. Because obviously we've had, the Chosen One.
Yeah, Cassian
kind of
realizes because of that moment, he realized he's where he needs to be.
Exactly.
And the whole end of the series, there's a moment that's very, I won't delve into it too much, but there's a moment where Cassian is kind of told, kind of has a choice to not leave the rebellion, but sort of form a different path in it, and he chooses to go a different direction, and obviously, we know where it leads. He's one of the most pivotal players within the rebellion. Like, he just, he did the most important thing. I mean, he got our main heroes in the trilogy to where they needed to be. It's just, I think, Andor and all this cast of characters have just been so just rich, and they've added so much to our.
I would have to say that the Andor characters are probably my favorite characters since Disney bought the franchise.
Well, they
Because-
might be like, I'm trying to think of the other like new characters from this era, like Mando and Grogu. Like their story's already been kind of ruined in my eyes, at least. You know, I apologize to anyone who still loves that.
And now it's just I kind of love Andor's story because it's complete.
It's complete. Exactly.
There's kind of no.
It's funny how Disney has now created a sort of new. Obviously, Star Wars isn't their film, but Rogue One and Andor is. They're 2 seasons and Rogue One.
Kind
That's
of
the
the
sort of
only
trilogy
great
that ramps
product
up
we got
into
from them.
this. It's like Disney kind of made an amazing Star Wars trilogy, like they didn't intend to.
Yeah.
But this is the
Unintentional
best we're ever
trilogy.
gonna get from them. But it's amazing how it's like a lot of people hate Disney Star Wars and what's happened, and I'd probably choose for them not to own it in the end of the day.
Yeah.
But they have given us with this show one of the greatest things in the saga. I don't think that's ever going to change in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And also, it sucks because we mentioned this earlier in the pod. Like, they spent so much money on this show, and it really shows.
Yeah.
There's never going to be another show like this.
I would highly doubt it, especially in terms of writing and just kind of tone as well.
No, but just production-wise, it's just
I think in everything.
no one's ever going to get
everything
money to
wise.
do something like this.
Everything
again.
wise, I don't think anyone's going to take Star Wars this seriously for quite some time. I really
mean,
don't think so.
That statement might not be true. Because again, we get into the
I
fact that
hope it's
Star
not
Wars
true.
means different things to different people.
Again, I
I
hope
don't.
it's not true. I hope
I
people
don't
take it
think
seriously
that
again.
Filoni and Favreau think they're disservicing Star Wars.
Mm.
Even if what they're doing is like the money's there, like let's bring Grogu back, this and that. Like there's still people who definitely love this franchise. I can't take that from them. Filoni has added so much. He's also diluted a lot, but he has definitely added a lot, and he's been
It's just-
working for Lucasfilm since
Andor
before the
felt
Disney
so
era.
refreshing to me because it really brought me back to the time of Star Wars where it's like anything could really happen.
Well,
you
yeah,
know?
but what I'm trying to get
the
at,
show, the series brings you to so many different places.
But
you know?
what I'm trying to get at, is really with the Filoni thing that I'm sorry to pull back, but it's interesting that for so long people are like, make Filoni the new Kathleen Kennedy, this and that. And now we're in an age where people are kind of starting to
see the
not
flaws in his
discredit
writing
him, but
a little
see
bit.
a little bit of the flaws, especially in his writing. He
Yeah.
definitely gets carried away with a lot of things. But it's interesting that kind of in
Ahsoka.
our eyes at least,
Yeah.
what this franchise needed was someone like you mentioned that wasn't the biggest Star Wars fanatic, but cared about making a special product in itself.
Yeah.
Each of the Star
He
Wars
had a
films,
story to tell and realized he could tell it within this world.
Yeah.
That's-
Each of the
that
Star
was
Wars
what was
films,
so great about it.
not all of them are directed by Lucas, 5 and 6, but they're each his babies. You
Yeah.
know, they really were,
They're very much the product of George, for
Yeah.
sure.
and this is really Gilroy and Co.'s babies. Tony Gilroy, his brothers, and everyone who worked on this series really just
Gave it their all.
masters of their craft.
Yeah.
And I believe he brought a bunch of people on that were skeptical to do this because they weren't big Star Wars fans. They knew where the franchise was at. They were scared. And once whatever he said to get them sold on, it just shows in this series like he had a vision and he totally accomplished it. There might be some flaws within this show, but it's still a great look into this galaxy, a look that we've never seen before.
Well, I think it might be testy for a lot of people. I really think
I wouldn't show this to your kids. You're showing Star Wars
yeah.
for the first time.
But if you are an older Star Wars fan,
Yeah.
and are looking for something that is entirely different from what we've gotten before, this is definitely you definitely have to check this series out.
It's
And if
very
you just
interesting-
love TV,
Yeah.
check this show out.
It's just also
It is that good.
Yeah, because realistically, it did. Like, I see what people kind of mean when they're like, it doesn't feel fully like Star Wars, but it still has the DNA there. And by the time you get to the end of the series, it reminds you what.
Well, honestly,
Star
don't
Wars
get
is
it
all
twisted.
about.
Especially in the first series, it uses the TV format. It is cinematic in its scope and what it does in some of the episodes, but it takes its time. It really delves into character in a different way, and that might test people with Star Wars.
There's like literally
Let's be real.
subtle things that happen. in
Look
this
back
show.
on 4, 5, and 6, and just how quick the movie just goes.
Yeah.
It just goes by. This is kind of the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
It really takes its time.
There's
And if
certain
you're
things
not
that
willing
if you're
to
not
do
paying
that,
attention,
yeah.
you're gonna miss them.
Exactly.
Like you will be confused if
There,
you don't.
it
pay
it
attention.
almost it enriches and delves into characters so much that it's like, wow, why am I seeing this? Sometimes you
Yeah.
see characters eating cereal in Star Wars. It is. It's actually.
Hey, well, you do think back. I think back to the first Star Wars movie.
Obviously,
and that.
Luke drinking.
Luke's a farm boy.
Luke does have cereal.
He's
that's
someone.
fair.
No, but he's someone from
But you
this
see
world.
people watching TV.
But that's the
You
idea,
see,
though,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like it also hones in on the fact that Luke is this normal person. Like, obviously, he has a destiny. And he's part of this lineage. But once people went to see that first movie,
Yeah.
and also I kind of see why they went with Rey being a nobody in The Last Jedi, because it goes back to that as well.
It goes back to that.
It does.
Notion,
It hones back in on that idea. It's a good idea. You know, someone from this, farm boy just gets pulled into this grander adventure.
It is funny you say it, because with Luke, you can excuse it because the story is so great. But with Rey, it's like, damn, they probably should have just stuck with her being a nobody.
No. That's genuinely one of my.
Like, at least that's
one of the more intriguing
compared to her
story
being Rey
points
Palpatine or whatever it is.
One of the more intriguing points of Episode 8 was definitely saying, like, you can be anyone. Like,
Yeah.
anyone can be someone, or
I think this is exactly what, like, at least the message I got from that movie. So
well,
it's
the
actually
whole
hilarious.
message of Episode 8 is killing the lineage.
Yeah.
Like, saying that, it's not all about the Skywalkers. And then, of course, the next movie just backtracked on
Completely
all of that.
backtracks on that.
Like,
Saying that
it's the whole
basically it is all
idea
about
of the
them.
film, and it just showed that JJ and Ryan Johnson
They
they
disagreed.
weren't in sync at all.
Yeah.
It just showed you the way they made that trilogy. This was Tony Gilroy just being, I know where I want to go with this.
Yeah.
Obviously, it probably evolved throughout all of it, but I think, knowing where Andor was going to be, or knowing where he ends up, it gave him a leeway to just be like, I can do whatever I want in this set time. So we didn't know who Cassian was. We only got a few lines about his past in Rogue One, and they were intriguing, but none of them were like, oh, I need to see who this guy is.
He has become one of my favorite Star Wars characters, and he's a Disney character too. Like, it's crazy for me to say, but
Hats off
he
to Diego
generally,
Luna.
especially by season 2, to me felt like Star Wars James Bond. Like, he was
Definitely.
he
The
was-
espionage was.
That's seriously what the vibes I was getting from this character in season 2, and I loved it. I thought he played off every single type of Cassian too, because he kind of becomes like a spy and
an interesting thing that also
someone who uses characters and stuff. So he's
No,
great
totally
acting
agree,
on
and I
the.
felt those vibes,
yeah.
especially with the Gorman
Diego
stuff.
Luna is just incredible.
But
in
I
the
will
role.
say, it's very interesting how I'm kind of like it, but no, it's just interesting how he evolves in the series, especially like kind of learning that his name isn't even Andor.
Yeah.
First off, it's Andor's just kind of a name he takes from someone.
they really delve into this man's backstory. Like,
Yeah.
you see a lot of it, and he's probably one of the most fleshed out Star Wars characters we've gotten to date.
Yeah, He definitely.
You really know the full story of Cassian Andor by the end of the series.
I mean, you kind of get like intimate with this character. Like, the show starts with him, looking for one of his family members or his sister that he lost a long time ago, and spoiler, I mean, he never finds her. Like that's just like, we delve into certain things in this series and parts of his life that like do kind of get like they're not resolved, because
Yeah.
the thing that matter is kind of the rebellion he gets sucked into because of Luthen. It's very interesting. Obviously, he believes in the rebellion and all that, but this series doesn't start with him being a rebel.
Yeah.
It not only showed the formation of the rebellion, but also what really the mentality that it takes to be
Yeah.
a rebel.
Yeah. It shows you exactly why people would want to do this. Again, what I was saying before of like how it depicts the Empire, it really shows you the extent of what they did and why people would want to rebel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you start 4 and it's just like there's a rebellion. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
The rebellion. Obviously, the Empire looks evil and they probably suck.
Yeah.
But this show shows you why. And what the Emperor really did to the galaxy.
Yeah, delving into certain planets that like
Which
probably
I thought-
barely even
which is
talk
like-
to the Republic.
This show just made my favorite parts of Rogue One, just did it even better. Because it's exactly the parts of Rogue One that I liked the best, which was the griminess and showing how kind of shitty it was to live in a galaxy in between episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah. I will say, obviously this was adult Star Wars, and they went really far on certain things in this show. Certain things, I could see people being like, yeah, that doesn't belong in Star Wars. Did that ever happen? Any moment in this series? Was there any moment where you're watching?
There were definitely moments that shocked me, and I was like, "Wow, like that's definitely a jump. That's definitely kind of crazier, and darker or like a little more mature than we've ever seen in Star Wars, but you got to think back to some stuff that they delved into, especially in Episode 3. It goes to pretty dark places.
No, but you know what I mean.
Yes, it's definitely
The
different
way
in tone
in which it's
and how
represented,
and
yeah, it's just so
But-
mature.
again, Tony Gilroy was kind of trying to tell a story that can be in any universe. It could have been in the normal world. You know what I mean? It could have just been in reality. He wanted to tell a story, and he didn't hold back. And
listen,
included the scenes he
for
wanted to
those
include.
listening to this and thinking like there's no space battles, there's no fights at all, you get them.
No,
And they are always high caliber and very entertaining to watch.
Yeah.
The Luthen space battle in season 1, incredible. And also, the production design in the show makes everything feel real.
Yeah.
In the sequels, it's all like it's
There's
just
finally stakes again in the Star Wars.
yeah. You
That's
don't
what it
you,
felt
you
like.
don't really feel like a lot of the things are physically there. In this show, mostly everything like you feel like you can interact with.
Yeah.
And that just hats
Pretty
off. Like
awesome.
obviously, I think there's certainly and a lot of the production in this show is like you can literally like order it online. Like it's like even like kind of like decked up like Amazon items and stuff like that.
Yeah, because it's an
But they
old-fashioned
still did
TV
their
series.
they still did their research enough to
They made it to
know-
look like
yeah,
like
but they
Star
knew
Wars.
where to fit each piece.
Yeah.
It's still very. I still like really applaud the production design of the show because they knew the areas they really needed to focus on.
Yeah.
And they knew. I'm not going to call it cutting corners. They just knew how to kind of skill the rest of it.
Yeah, and they found great locations for some pre-existing locations we already have. They did some physical locations like for Coruscant. Found some great spots.
It's not featured heavily in the series, but Naboo, very interesting how we saw that presented as well.
Yeah.
Very brief.
I love making, kind of, it was something like we should have saw in the sequels where it helped bridge the gap between prequel, and the originals where it's like using physical sets for stuff that was kind of all CG or something like that in the prequels. Like, yeah, like you said, Naboo, making it kind of a physical / CG set gave some life to it a little bit.
Yeah. No, I think I could be wrong about this. You might even know, but I think the volume was out before this show. The volume is the stagecraft technology they used to
Yeah.
make Mando and probably the movies and
And they completely avoid that in Andor.
yeah, and Andor.
It's not used once.
I don't know if they offered it to Gilroy or not, but he chose not to use it. And
Well,
it shows.
the reason he chose not
Well,
to
it
use
just
it
shows
is
'cause
because you sort
it's
of
not
do,
there.
to explain it to people listening, you sort of do post before in a way.
yeah, it's
where
just a
you-
way
you
different
touch
way
up-
of filmmaking.
It's a much different.
It's creating
way
the
of filmmaking
environment
that I
before,
think people on the show were used to. You know what I mean? The people on Andor had never used that technology
Yeah.
before. Which is
Especially a lot of the
essentially doing
production
post
people brought onto it.
before. They did post normally, where they just
Yeah.
do it afterwards.
I'm not saying the
So-
volume isn't something a technology that definitely
It's a
has
tool
its
that
benefits.
can work.
Yeah.
But I think they started overusing it quite a little bit. in
Oh, it
this other
really
series.
shows in Kenobi.
Oh yeah,
That show looks terrible.
yeah.
I'm
mean,
sorry to
show
fans of that
should have looked
series, but
incredible.
you
too.
know that the set design is not good.
One, that show should have been a movie, and two, that show should have looked and been a lot better. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna say that.
It didn't deserve any of the lazy writing. That's why it's just so funny watching Andor. I'm like, yeah, they actually cared to make a show. Like it wasn't just fan service bullshit that. So there's no part of this series that you think kind of just jumped too far. That just
I mean, there are some parts that definitely had me like, whoa, like that's a little far for Star Wars. But again, I think it really fits into the story that Gilroy was trying to tell. So
there's certain aspects though certain things that like really really ground it. Say like someone gets hit, falls to the ground, they just hit their head and die.
Yeah.
Like we've never seen anything like that in this franchise.
no, it's wildly different.
It is a crazy jump in that regard too, where it's like, damn, like yeah, people can get just hit, fall down, and get killed in this show. Someone has a stroke in Star Wars.
Yeah, it's like that. It goes that far. I do agree with you, where it's just like it's
like,
really
I can
going
see
for
some
realism.
people's
It's going for
complaints
realism.
being like, yeah, this is just why would I need to see this in Star Wars?
Yeah.
But if you really, really kind of get engulfed in these characters, maybe certain things like the person getting hit in the head, that's different. But
That's why it's
everything
such a,
feels so.
It
has
adds
such
to how much
weight.
of an anomaly this show is, because I can kind of understand why people would dislike it, but I don't.
Yeah.
I truly think it's great. And if you don't buy into it, and your Star Wars is just the quick movement of the movies.
Well, there's certain people that just
and that
love
kind of
just
thing, I get
Jedis
that.
and
yeah,
magic
exactly.
and.
Yeah, I mean that's
And
great too.
obviously, that's an amazing aspect of Star
Yeah.
Wars. I'm not saying that doesn't, that shouldn't be in Star Wars. It should be in most of Star Wars. I just thought this was a great
Didn't
project
belong in this. that really highlighted a part that we knew was the reality for the galaxy. That's why it's kind of cool that it's kind of based in realism, because this in a way is what Gilroy is saying. This was the reality for everyone in the galaxy during the time where there were no Jedis and no magic and no light. It was kind of shitty, you know, like they were just.
How do you just use the word shitty? Like, how do you feel how did you feel
hearing that
word in Star Wars?
That definitely caught me off guard. Yeah, they did that in season 1, but
they did it in both seasons.
Oh yeah, sure.
People just curse.
Yeah, people just kind of.
I think the only thing they were off, the only thing they couldn't do, which I think they wanted to do, was an F-bomb.
That might have been a little too far.
I agree. I think, especially knowing the line that it would have been, the fight the Empire line, it worked a lot better as fight instead of.
I agree. I actually think it's a great.
It's funny, yeah. It just wasn't needed to jump that far. Like it's like obviously it's just the F-bomb, but like it's not needed in Star Wars. Like, and the moments where they do say shit, like they're pretty big, great moments, like good moments of dialogue. It's not just to say shit.
Yeah, it's not just thrown in there just to say it. I don't think any line in the show is thrown in just to say it. Like there is some top tier writing in this show.
Yeah,
like that's really what.
No, like I genuinely hope this show is acknowledged award
season. We have not seen caliber writing in this possibly since Empire. I'm not even gonna that might be.
It's funny.
I
had a conversation with someone. I had a conversation with a random person.
Yeah,
literally, I think I overheard him talking about Andor.
It's just the complexity,
but
and the levels of complexity we get to.
And this was someone who's way older than me. He's, he was alive during the original trilogy, and that's his Star Wars, obviously. And he was very disheartened by the prequels and the sequels.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he told me it took him a while to watch this series, and it did for me too. I had to be convinced to really delve into it because I was very much out on Star Wars.
Yeah,
very much out. And he told me he eventually did it, and he just was floored by just how the writing was just so detailed. And honestly, like you said, it's the best since episode 5, but you're probably right. Listen, episode 5 is the best written of the films.
But okay, I'm just gonna say, but I do like many parts of episode 6, especially on the writing, in regards to writing, especially everything with the Emperor, Vader, and Luke. That writing is top tier. But you know what I mean? The complexity, the level of complexity that Andor gets to, we haven't really seen since episode 5. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's truly just stuff that made me think like, wow, like this is how
on top
intricate
of it,
these stories
on
can
top
be.
of it though, like we've said, you get some of the most visually interesting things in the saga.
Yeah,
like wow, and it's funny, we haven't even delved into like how just like great some of these individual arcs are. I'll leave that for everyone listening to this that hasn't watched.
If you had to pick a favorite arc of the show, what would you say is the best?
I will reveal my favorite arc. I was gonna say I'm not gonna delve into what each arc is, but personally, I love the prison arc so much.
Mm-hmm.
Recency bias might make me pick Gorman.
Yeah.
I think that Who Are You is the best episode of the series.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's so...
I think Who Are You might be top 5 TV episodes of all time.
Yeah, it was just... I couldn't believe I was watching something
if you know, you know.
Star Wars. Yeah, it was just actually like jaw dropped like the whole time. Like on the edge of your seat until the moment happens. But then after that, you're just like, wow. Yeah. It's like how... Like, there's certain things in the show, though, too. Yeah, like, now knowing they were given complete creative control, like, it just makes sense. But, like, there's certain shots where I'm like, wow, like, they got brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not that you see, like, blood splatters and all this, but, like, people get really hurt in this show. And just, like I said before, they just die.
Yeah.
It's not like Kenobi where
kind
someone
of
takes
injuries,
a lightsaber stab and survives.
Some injuries where you think, like, oh, they'd probably survive, especially if they were, like, a main character like Han or Luke in the original trilogy. No. These characters that get hit.
Well, that's what it was saying. Focusing on these people, like obviously, I talked about Andor having a destiny, but like, destiny was to die, and like, all these other people just kind of die.
Well, a main part of the series
this makes you care about them. Like,
main part of the series is sacrifice and kind of showing what it really took.
But if you really pay attention during the show, you'll see a lot of people that were on the beaches in Rogue One that die. It really helps, like, add the weight to that too. It's so much more sad watching Rogue One now.
Yeah.
Especially with the ending of Andor, which we won't delve into, but Watch
Yeah.
Andor, guys.
If I had to pick a favorite arc too, I'd probably go either Gorman or potentially the last arc too. I actually
I loved
really
it.
think the last arc really did a great job.
Yeah, it's like
especially in
I
wrapping
pick
up
my favorite
some-
arc, and then I'm like, there's so much of the show that I
I just
love
think
on the same
how
level.
the show wraps up every character's journey
Yeah.
in that last arc is
Yeah,
is
it's
so
crazy
well
how
written.
it felt complete, but you still know there's more.
Yeah, there's
Like,
more to
you
it.
know what happens.
That's
with these
how
people, but
well
it still
written
felt
it
like
is.
a
It's like
complete
the show is complete, but you know there's more to it. There's an entire saga of movies out there actually.
Yeah.
That it just enriches.
that helps show you what the
I
sacrifice
truly
is for.
this is the best. This is the biggest thing that's come out since the original 6 movies that enriched the world in a way that I
Some would
truly,
argue
truly
Clone Wars.
appreciate.
Some would argue it, and that's fair. It added a lot, especially contextualizing the prequels.
Yes.
But this
To
is
contextualize the original
this is
trilogy,
a for the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm.
But not that the Clone Wars also, helped contextualize a little bit of the originals with Tarkin and stuff like that. But this was really just a special thing to enrich, especially the first movie, like we said, Star Wars.
Agreed.
It's very much about getting to that moment.
And truthfully, I just gotta say thank you, Tony Gilroy.
Yeah, like genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Tony Gilroy, for just kind of reinvigorating a love for this franchise in me again. Obviously, I'm passionate about it. People on this people who listen to this channel, they know that we like Star Wars. We loved it, but I haven't felt any excitement for it until I was convinced to watch Andor.
Yeah.
Well, we were excited.
And
Mando was Mando, but it's over
very
in my eyes.
low level of optimism for what's to come with this
Yeah,
franchise.
but before we wrap this up, I just really we know Andor. We're not gonna get something like it again.
Yeah.
So it's like, am I just done caring about the franchise again? I might be.
They'll have to. I'm gonna wait and see, obviously, but part of me really feels like I just
One thing I will
We'll
say is,
we will see.
I'm very excited for Tony Gilroy's next project.
Yes.
He's been involved with Star Wars for a long time. Obviously, I would love to see him stay, but he made a very great, complete thing here, and I'm very excited to see what he does next. Just gotta say that.
Agreed. Well, we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks, Gilroy.